So we're recording.
Cute for me to start laughing nervously.
Yeah, same. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's fine. I am a goofball on these things sometimes. So
Pretty much whenever a camera gets pointed at me, like I just start laughing nervously, and that's my and like it doesn't stop until the camera gets pointed away from me.
Yeah, I get that. Like, I actually took improv for a very short time. Like, I took 3 or 4 weeks of improv, and it was supposed to be like 16 weeks, however many weeks. And that's exactly what would happen. Is just like, the cue would come to me, and I'd be like, just start laughing. So I quit after 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe I'll go back one day.
I like the idea of just that being your choices in improv too. Like every time it's like, well, you know what? Here's my choice.
And then what does the next person do when it's yes and? Like, like all of a sudden you have a room full of people like,
Which I might enjoy more than more normal improv, to be honest.
Some improv is a little not great. It's true.
I've seen very little of it. I'm actually just being a snotty little asshole by saying that.
But I think improv is...
I project a lot of negativity onto improv that is not based on any actual experience with it.
Oh, you should take them to improv class.
You know what's going to solve that? Improv.
Not to shoot on you, but
I was just picturing like a doctor who just like that's their only recommendation for every ailment.
Improv.
Somebody comes in, yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing that's going to cure that strep throat is improv.
I mean,
no.
I mean, you never know. It's laughter. Laughter is good medicine.
True.
It really is.
You've been in improv bands too, right?
Oh yeah, lots of improvisational kinds of projects. All kinds of different. Yeah.
What relations do you find between improv theater and improv kind of that and improv music?
So that's a good question. In my mind, it's so my brain is always on like 15 tracks at once. Sometimes they get a little tangly. So like when I think of improv, I think of jazz, I think of avant-garde, I think of like poetry exercises, I think of movements, so like Nia, Tai Chi, Qigong, things like that, or even Aikido, things that I've like spent very little time with, but I've spent very little time with all of them. There are similarities in all of those things. And so I kind of take lessons from each of those things. So like Aikido and Tai Chi and Qigong, obviously there are certain movements that happen. Like there are movements that expand your periphery vision, and there are movements that to kind of inform you to stand back so you can take a bigger vision. And then there are movements to kind of move energy and like all kinds of things. And I feel like music is like that too. So like if you're in an improvisational situation, you can choose or not choose to respond to anything that's happening on stage with the musician and or in the whole entire room. And that's why I like avant-garde, because the avant-garde expands that space. So you have the space of the stage, and there are different levels in that too. So some improvisers are very locked into, this is the key I'm in, and these are this is the box. And often in avant-garde, there might not be a box, which could work or not work, right? So I think I'm getting away from your question a little bit.
No, that's good. It's I'm just curious. It's sort of my only experience with improv has been with a group of musicians that I played with in Lincoln, and because of our I mean, we had our box around us of the kind of places where we went, but we also just would invite different musicians constantly and people who weren't musicians to play with us. So I think about that in relation to writing a lot, but I've never thought about theater improv or comedy improv or those kinds of things, except with my being a snotty asshole about it. I think it just becomes like a go-to joke for a certain set of people.
Sure.
Probably as poetry becomes a go-to joke for a different set of people.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is like, it's a limited scope, right? It's a limited understanding. So like, we've all met those kind of stock poets, I guess, that people think all poets are. I think I don't want to say stock poets, but like, for lack of a better term, like the I don't want to talk poorly of anybody.
Yeah, I'm just kind of watching where you're going with this.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that. I'm like, no. Do tell. It's just, let's say young players, young practitioners, young poets, people who are very new at it. I think we all go through that when we're learning something, where we start talking from what we know. And so that could be a box. And so like, when you're talking about a box, I did want to make it clear that well, in the past I've really poo-pooed and like kind of condescended on the box. The box is really important for a lot of reasons, and the box could be different things, and you can do different things with the box in and outside or whatever, and you can break the box or whatever. And all of it is relevant. And all stages of a process are relevant, including being young in the process, and even getting stuck there. There's some value in that. It's just something I personally don't want to do. And it's taken me a really long time to be able to be in that space, because I've been the undergrad person too, like, oh, I'm better than this, like, I don't know what these people are doing, like, poets who don't read, like.
Right. all of my like wannabe beatnik stuff was a teenager, is so far before any online stuff that none of it, embarrassingly, might be still out there. So I can just pretend all that never existed.
That's a different Mathias, right?
And I think it's just the same thing you're saying. Like, I was, like the stuff that as a teenager really excited me was the stuff that seemed transgressive and seemed like it was sort of aiming at creating a different world. And I didn't understand at the time the deep fucking flaws in the community of the beatniks and all that.
Yeah.
Because there was those hagiography kind of biographies of them too. So that was like where I was just like, oh, this is the stuff, and like trying to write just like it, trying to write like Ginsberg and all that. So, which is also not my skill set.
You're talking about like jazz and improv, and for me, I always say jazz was the gateway drug, because I listen to all kinds of weird shit now, like just, and I love some pop music and stuff too, but then I listen to like Degenerate Art Ensemble or Zena Parkins. This probably sounds like Greek, but like it's like
Zena Parkins is great.
She's freaking been, oh my gosh, she's freaking amazing. And like, it's hard for a lot of people. Like the folks I went with, they were my ride, a mother and a daughter, and they played here at the biennial, the first time the biennial was in Denver. And I was so stoked and I was so into it. And I just felt it I was having so much fun. The people next to me, both of them were like in fetal position, like into each other, like, and I'm like, do you guys want to go? I didn't really want to go, but they were my ride.
It's kind of hard to just like drop people into experimental music.
I know. You go into a room but there's like clanging and you're like, what is happening?
We're just like a steady sound of power violence or something, or power electrics, it's like, no, this is nice. Like, we're having a good time, right?
Yes. It's like, and then you look and you're like, oh, let's go listen to some Beethoven. Or,
lovely. Yeah.
So before we go too much further and I go too far off track of wherever I started, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm Mathias John Svalina. I live in this garage temporarily in Denver, Colorado. Now I feel like I'm doing like a ad for myself.
A what?
Like,
a guide?
Like a TV, like an infomercial for me. I'm like, come along. I'm Mathias John Svalina. I live in a garage and I need a haircut. And what else is good about me? That's about it. I don't know. What do you want to know?
Well, I know a lot of people know about like I don't know. Well, I guess it'll open up. Because my brain, I just walked in the sun for like 2.5 hours, I think. So I'm like, my brain might be a little squishy.
Yeah. Not I had that yesterday. I did a march from downtown to City Park and then biked out to Rocky Mountain Arsenal and back. And then was like, oh wait, that was a lot of sunshine and 90 degrees.
Yep. Yesterday was hot. It was so
Yesterday hot. Was a little hot.
Yeah. How was the marching?
And I did this like very classic Colorado white boy moment where in the morning I picked up my sunblock and then thought to myself, I think I've developed my base tan enough. And put the sunblock down, like a fucking douchebag. And then, came back last night, just totally fried.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Oh, I know everyone I see with burns, I'm like, here's some aloe. Have some aloe. It won't feel good at first, but it'll help.
Yeah.
Well,
the march was amazing. It was run by the DPS students and some members of the school board.
Yeah.
And it was really great to hear from students, primarily young women and students of color. And it was really, it was like, such a like family friendly march.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And also, but it was really amazing because there was a lot of like parents with their school kids, and a couple times I saw kids see their teacher, and it must be the first time that they've seen their teacher in person since before COVID, and they're just like, Mrs. Anderson.
Oh my goodness.
And to have that happen in the midst of, an event of grief and celebration and liberation and possibility seemed so amazing to me. Yeah, that they would, I don't know. So I was really glad that I was there.
That's good. And the last time we talked, you were
it seems like a million years ago now.
It kind of does, and it really wasn't that long ago. So like
Friday before last, I think.
Yeah. I should probably say I've been following your work for a while. There are a lot of writers and artists I follow, and sometimes I let social anxiety get in the way and never say anything, or I guess you probably noticed I've made some posts or something, and then you're like, hey, let's talk, let's meet in person. And that was really cool. And like the last time we talked, you were on your way. You were kind of chasing stories. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but the way I heard it in my head, the way it translated in my head was like there are these stories posited all over a city, and you're biking towards these kind of stories or these landmarks and writing about them. And I was wondering.
Yeah, sort of. I actually didn't find the one that I was trying to find. So I'm doing this project for the MCA Denver right now where I'm writing dreams that are at different places around town. So it's kind of like a dream audio tour. And I'm doing 12 of them that sort of center around downtown that can be a walking tour, and then 12 that are in more far-flung spots of Denver. And I was trying to find the Pecos Community Garden, which has been a community garden since the 70s in the Highlands that day, but I had the wrong address. So I ended up actually biking by it, trying to find it, I realized later. but I ended up not finding it, and then just went up to the Capitol and was up with the demonstrations for the day. So yeah, that's kind of that's why I went out to the Arsenal yesterday. I was trying to find a spot, and I'm sort of trying to find spots to embed these little dream narratives, these little surrealist narratives that I haven't written all of them yet, so I don't know how they're all working, but some of them sort of rise out of the place in a sort of literal way, and some of them rise out of the history, and some of them are just sort of whatever silly shit I'm thinking. So yeah, so they're kind of, I've got all the locations that I'm working with, and I'm still writing them now.
Yeah, awesome. And this is kind of an extension out of the dream delivery service that you do.
Yeah.
Which I imagine is one of many things you do, and you're kind of known for the dream delivery service. Is that?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I've been doing with my life for the last 4 years. And I go to a city and take subscribers, and every day for a month I write and deliver dreams to them. And I do it by mail as well. And then ideally I move on to the next city, traveling by bike and camping and biking along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID's kind of put a hiatus on that for this summer.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I live in a garage.
You know what? I used to live in an attic.
Yeah. No, we talked about this. Yeah.
And a good friend and I, one summer we were crushing walls and stuff because we were going to turn this shed in the back of someone's yard into a living space.
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of gave up on it because we didn't know what the crap we were doing. But we had these kind of lofty dreams, like we're gonna have a garden and like a little tub at the back so we can moon paint. That was when I started to learn I was kind of a hippie. And yeah, but it was just so much work, and we didn't know what we were doing at all. But we definitely tried it. And I think when I was a kid, when I was a kid, my mom, my dad, and my brother and I, my youngest brother wasn't born yet, we lived in the fucking desert in California in an army tent for a while. And actually, I loved that.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were roughing it.
Uh-huh. You're just like, oh, we're just having a cool adventure.
So I mean, like, a garage is like legit.
I think so too. Yeah. I'm perfectly happy in a tent.
Yeah.
But it's nice, in the city to have walls.
Structure of some sort, yeah.
Yeah, that's my dream thing.
The dream thing. Yeah, well, you told me
talk about these things.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to like stay on that, but I did definitely want to mention it. Because I know how uncomfortable it is when people are like, "Oh, you do this thing." And I'm always like, I do a lot of things.
Yeah. But I don't really do a lot of things anymore because of like the kind of lifestyle shift with that. I've had to put other things on hold because I don't have time to be doing or I don't have like the access or the schedule to be doing the editing work that I was doing.
Yeah.
And I don't have like a lot of time for real writing. So
what does real writing mean?
Well, I mean writing real in the sense of writing that's aimed towards publishing as a book.
Yeah.
Versus writing for that dream project, which is sort of its own niche, I guess.
Yeah. is it okay to ask what things you need in place to be able to get to that writing, or do you think that you'll get back to that, or do you want to?
I mean, I'm also trying to write fiction, like narrative, more straight ahead fiction. So I've learned in my failure to do that the mindset for doing that is very different than the mindset for writing poetry for me, which a kind of complex life and a scattered attention is beneficial. And so working on like narrative fiction, I find that I need downtime and I need sort of more focus, and I haven't been very good at creating that time for myself.
Yeah.
So, and because what I do with the dream stuff is all very hand to mouth and piecemeal, it's hard to plan for the future.
I get that. Yeah. I pre-COVID, I was working. We talked about this a little bit. I was working 5 jobs, like 7 days a week, and I'm finally looking around my apartment. I'm like, what the flip happened here? Like, no, what is this place? It's very, you know. And also just realizing, like, I thought I was having a lot of cognitive dysfunction, and the cognitive dysfunction was that kind of piecemeal life that I was living. And so like I feel like I'm in this space of like I mean, obviously none of us know what things look like going forward, and it's very difficult to plan, but like I'm starting to realize for me how broken that way of being has been, and like just like maybe I don't want to do that anymore quite like that, you know.
That seems like a good silver lining moment for being able to assess that.
I try to find a silver lining.
Yeah. No, I mean, I you know, for all of the obvious fucking horror and terror and like disruption that's happening with COVID and reaction to it, it's like also requiring people who have not been required to reassess those paths. Yeah, I'm not saying anything new. You know, people are already been saying this for a while now. But like,
I think it's worth repeating.
Yeah, I think it is too, and I think it is in relation to the uprising in the last week too, and sort of how those reassessments for a lot of people who've been in places of privilege. I think there's reassessment in the uprising, but like how the reassessment forced by COVID is kind of going in relation or in hand with what's going on right now. And it's not like COVID's gone away too. Yeah.
Right. It's really like I wasn't able to do a lot of deep thinking and work and stuff for the things that this has been bringing up for me. I am a lot of times in spaces where I'm the only person of color, and I grew up in Boise, Idaho, not around a lot of people of color. So I have certain degrees of privilege, and also certain degrees of things that I am learning now that I've never had a chance to learn, that I feel like I have to do really fast sometimes, and also just trying to figure out what I can do. So I have a group of folks I talk to. They're like literally activists on the front lines of organizations, the native issues, LGBTQIA and Black folks, and like somehow I get to talk with them, and I look up to them so much because they are always doing that work, like every single day, like on the front lines, literally, like being infiltrated by like FBI and also like, you know, right-wing activists and all kinds of crazy stuff that they deal with all the time. And I feel really young a lot of times and naive, and I'm always asking them, what can I do, what can I do? And they're always like, well, we're on the front lines, and there's a reason why we're on the front lines, you know, to make space for people to do the things that they're able to do from wherever they are, not making that sound like an excuse, but being like, you know, whatever skills you have, you can work there, you don't have to be on the front lines with us. And I found that really heartening, even though there's still part of me like, I need to be there, right? Like, what can I do? Or what do I need to learn, or whatever. But they're always kind of assuring me that I'm where I need to be, and I need to like kind of dig deeper where I'm at. So I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I have to look at that too. I think there are a lot of folks who come to me asking for help, understanding certain things, and there are lots of things that I'm learning. So I don't know why I felt like I had to explain all that, but like, that's something definitely that this time is bringing up for me even more. Like before, it felt like, oh, we have time to like make sure we do it right and solidly or whatever. But I don't know. I can't find the words around that, but like it felt like there was a lot more time and spaciousness to be able to lean into it when it didn't hurt as much. And I feel like that's irresponsible of me. And that's what I'm learning, I think, during this time, is that.
Yeah, I think as like a white dude with radical political views, like I've entered into sort of the middle-aged part where I succumbed to assuming all the things that I dreamed of were impossible too. And then I just like, I think for me it was a lot like, you know, I was reading anarchist texts about cops and like following Cop Watch and all that, like since the 90s. And
yeah, the
idea of this sort of public discussion on a national level about defunding police and the hyper militarization and the arms industry kickbacks of the cops and all that, like happening in public places now. I'm like, oh my God, like this, I never thought this would be happening. Like I never thought like,
yeah,
my friends who are outside of radical circles would ever even think of agreeing with this, and just how much that has just been like kind of nestling back into my privilege over these like last decades. It's been like, oh yeah, you know, I believe all this radical shit, but also like I just walk through the world, you
know? And even so, I feel like,
not to be all like mea culpa to you.
yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. Like I have noticed that, like even in just the things you post, you know, obviously I don't know you real well, but even just the things you post are far from simply superficial level. Like I think there's a lot of kind of performative,
yeah,
you know, kind of actions that
I'm having trouble with figuring out the performatives. I mean, there's the obvious shit of like people taking selfies at the protests and, you know, like,
yeah,
sort of, you know, like,
feels
but then
weird.
there's also this like, I don't know, I feel like there's this gradation of people wanting to express things that they've felt and not having the words to express it yet.
Yes, that's real.
And not having done that, not having done the homework to do it either, and not having had the experiences where they've run into violent racism, systemic racism. I'm talking about mostly like middle class enough white people here, like liberal-minded or generally well-meaning, moderate or liberal. Right. You know, and that sense of like wanting to say this stuff, but not wanting to feel like a phony, or not wanting to feel like they're, I don't know. So as I'm not defending performative allyship in any respect, but I think there's a way that it gets put into a binary of what is and what isn't. So
thank you for that. I think that's really important.
I don't know. I'm not sure that that's expressed well, but it's something that I've been like bouncing around, and I don't know.
I think
and also I'm not a fucking expert in any of this either. Like all I know how to do is like write weird shit, and then like I start spouting about things that are above my psychic pay grade or something.
I don't think that's a fair thing to say about your. Because
but I think there's a danger of being able to like put words together well.
Yeah.
You know, like I can make rhetoric. You know, I don't have the homework, and I don't have the background to like put the ideas that are best present the ideas that are best presented. I don't know what those are. So I think I fall into a thing of trying to like befuddle my way into understanding something, and then I like get charmed by the fact that I can like say words good, and like then I want to like put it public. I don't know. It's its own.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, stop me from more self-deprecating shit.
This is related. So I just read.
I hope it's like asking me to self-deprecate, because that's really.
Well, I'm thinking about your book of recipes that I just read, and so we were talking about kind of a box earlier, and in poetry, maybe that's a form, or in writing, it's a form, right? Huh?
Yeah.
Or a zine. Yeah, more of a zine. And
do you have friends who say zine?
I do not know. Do people say zine?
I have a couple friends who say zine, and I'm always like, oh, I guess you learned that from like reading it. So, oh no, like, I don't want to be like, I don't know, you know, like I don't want to be like Mr. like correct fucking pronunciation or something. But that one's always like confused me, because I'm like, but a zine is like a little magazine.
That's what I thought too. But maybe in some people's minds, it's separate from magazine. Magazine is different.
Yeah, like maybe it's its own zine. Like, yeah, like a magazine is just a fucked up ad-filled zine. I don't know. I was totally cut you off. I apologize.
That's right. I actually still kind of remember my question. So when you do a zine, and
thank you,
and have so in the recipes, it's a series of recipes, and in the erotic, scare quoted erotic poems or dreams, it's a series around a theme. So it feels like when I'm reading those, it feels like there's some really sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes very funny, and sometimes very I hate the word poignant, but I'm just going to go ahead and say poignant words.
I'm a middle-aged white guy. You can go with like sentimental and poignant. It's definitely my wheelhouse now.
Well, like poignant observations that come through, like, you know, you'll be in the middle of a forum or kind of a joke, and there's something that comes through that is very like it cuts through to the heart. So I'm trying to get to the actual question part. Like something I talk about a lot is like the poems and the writing that is created is the person themselves. Like it is our experiences and our thought processes and like all the things that make up who we are and how we see it. And that, and obviously we can manipulate that in all kinds of different ways, right? And decide how it's going to go. But I feel like there are things that happen in those zines or zines that are deeper truths. Like they're not I've read a lot of that performative kind of level poetry, and I'm not naming names, but every time I read stuff like that, it just kind of gets under my skin. And it's just like things like, oh, I'm going to put an image of a Native American here on the side of the road as part of my journey. And like,
this sounds like a Doors song now.
It doesn't sound like a Doors song. or like, but it's all about that that person. It's not about the thing they're seeing, you know. And I've it's taken me a really long time to be able to like figure out quite what's bugging me about stuff like that, where they just plug it in as if they care about certain causes or whatever, and it's really just
becomes like sort of conceptual objectification.
Yeah, in a weird way that is easy for, I guess, a lot of people to miss. But that doesn't happen with your work. You know, I don't feel like that. There are a lot of books of yours I can't find, and I'm about to borrow them. I hope that doesn't sound like a threat.
Yeah, might be full total bullshit. Next time we talk, and I've read your bullshit.
Part 2. Okay, yeah. we need to talk. No, just
record scratch. Nah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by then I will have editing skills. So no, just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most of the stuff that I've written and published is kind of in keeping with the dream stuff, and like a kind of surrealist, but still embedded at least in a capitalist world. It's, I don't know. I like the formalism stuff. I like formalism.
Okay.
And I like trying to work with a form until you can sort of untie it, and until it collapses, so that you get the sort of gestures toward rhetorical order, but you get what kind of doesn't fit into those orders too. So like my first book is a bunch of surrealist creation myths, and the second book is like a bunch of surrealist business plans, and the book of surrealist instructions for children's games that just came out, and I have what else? A book of like surrealist failed love poems.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of sense of like being stuck inside of one mode and trying to find the edges of that mode is appealing to me. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm about to switch into just talking about how everything I write is crap.
I'm trying to keep you from doing that.
I
definitely disagree, and I know that's weird to hear from people. I was like, so like I really like this idea of in my head I was thinking, oh, you fray and warp the box.
Like, yeah, but I also think, like, you know, even there's a sense in creating artistic products, you know, that it's pretty obviously like what becomes called avant-garde is oftentimes only its own like aesthetic genre as well, and where innovation in liberating practices, from my point of view on it, they often come from like sitting with the self and exploring the self in multiple ways. So for me, it's like the multiplicity of formalism and the sort of endless repetitions of it is what's liberating about it to me. And I also, I mean, I don't know if I think that's true. I think I was just putting some words together.
I do that all the time. I'll say something, and
the whole time I was in grad school, I feel like I was like training to act like a person who was smart. And so now I have that is like in the background, where it's like at any moment I can code switch into this like potentially smart seeming thing.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, did I fucking say anything, or did I just do like Lacan, la la la?
But
So,
I I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning those things. I mean, I think it's in alignment with like you're talking about this box, even like when you were talking about it, you were going internally. Like there's this understanding of who we are, or maybe questioning, and like if you're chipping away at the box, like you're, or whatever tools you're using to get through it, you know, or maybe you're throwing it in the river and letting the river do the thing, or however you're doing it, like it's going to change, and you can't, like, in some ways you can kind of determine how that change is going to happen, but maybe in some ways you can't, you know.
yeah.
And
I think
that,
also growing older, like,
yeah,
you know, I didn't write anything that became a book until I was 32, I think, is when I wrote the stuff that became my first book.
yeah,
And I think in my 20s, I wanted to be a kind of poet, but I didn't have the like ability to think. Like, I wanted to be like a Southern narrative poet who took on issues of history and class and race, and what I wrote then were these like kind of shitty appropriative poems about like the Black Panthers and about like the sort of about Reconstruction in Richmond, and they were not good poems, and they were not good thinking, but they were like the thing that I wanted to be good at, and I wasn't. So it took me a while, I think, to just like figure out like what I was actually good at, and then sort of branch away from that too.
okay.
So that, you know, so other books of mine are not in the sort of light surrealist mode or whatever my stuff is, you know, but they stemmed out of figuring out what I could actually do as a writer, and then deconstructing that as well, of trying to expand the boundaries of that. So I don't know what I'm even saying now. I don't know why I said any of this.
I think something I've been thinking about a lot is how I think a really good example is like the musicians we love. So like for me, The Cure, right? Or PJ Harvey. And in my teens, my late teens ish, I started getting into this really, you know, a lot of music that was really kind of dark, you know, like I liked the dark, like sad Cure songs, and PJ Harvey was kind of like, you know, cathartic and sad and stuff, and like, you know, all of the 90s kind of alt rock, gloomy, like 2 clicks shy of goth kinds of music, that I was really super into it, because it was like, wow, like this is the feeling that I'm feeling, you know.
Yeah.
And then, so I remember when PJ Harvey came out with this album, and that first track was Good Fortune. It's a fucking
Yeah.
happy song, and I hated it so much. I love it now, but I hated it. I was like, what happened? She got happy.
Yeah.
Did she get happy? Shit.
Right.
You know, and that's terrible thinking, because like we should be allowed to change and grow. And like, I think music is a good example, is because we think that the artists we love and grew up with are always going to be the same, because it's like, you know, oh, this is my theme song for life or whatever. And we don't, it's really hard for us to see them change and grow. So like even The Cure, like in the late 90s, 2000s, their songs were changing. And I didn't know at the time of their earlier music either. And I started with like Disintegration. So then like Head on the Door, and like Imaginary Boys, and like, you know, like all the kind of real dark, gritty kinds of stuff. And so their music started changing a little bit, and and it was produced differently, and it, you know, and it didn't feel good to me anymore. And so for a long time I went away from them, before going back, before, you know, I gained a little bit of maturity and was like, oh wait, I get to change too. So why wouldn't the musicians I love get to change, you know? And I think this happens with artists and writers too. Like, it's more simple for folks to pigeonhole us or like hold us to I think what I'm trying to say is, like, I really appreciate that you're talking about your growth, um, and because a lot of people don't. I remember in my undergrad, I had this friend who I felt really close to. I felt really close to, and I admired him so much. People thought I had a huge crush on him, and I might have, but I didn't think of
People
our.
thought I had a crush on him, and they were right.
Not, it wasn't quite like that though.
Yeah, no,
like I remember one time he invited me over for a movie, and I think in the middle of the movie we were both just like, okay, I'm gonna go home now. Like, it was just like, this isn't. But like, what did he say to me? I remember it was kind of a break for me, and a heartbreak, honestly. Because in my undergrad, because I have I'd never really had gotten an opportunity until then to start learning how to be in communities, because my family moved around a lot, I moved around a lot, and I have a lot of social anxiety. It used to be real bad. And in my undergrad, I got to be like the heads of groups and communities and clubs and stuff. And my friend was also part of that. And I remember sometimes I don't have the greatest filters. So, you know, like folks like lawyers and politicians, they wear a face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of other folks in society, in academia or wherever you are, they're wearing a face so that they can do their job and so that they can like not be sullied by whatever else they are. Like, no one else can know about those things. And unfortunately mine's just, I just figure it's all just there. And I remember we were talking about it, and I think I was really feeling sorry for myself that I don't have that mask, I don't have that face, and that you know, I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, I thought something was wrong with me, that I couldn't function the way I thought I was supposed to function on a professional level, right? I mean, I can be professional, obviously, but like my emotions and the things I'm about are also there. Like, those things are still there. And he said something like, some of us are just better at hiding it. Some of us are better at hiding our mistakes. Some of us are better at hiding all the other stuff that's behind our face.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt heartbreaking to me, because part of me was like, that's not fair. And part of me was like, how do I do that? Am I ever going to be able to do that? I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do that.
Right.
And
how we're taught to not be a person.
Yeah, like a whole person.
How we benefit from not being a person.
Yeah. A whole person, like a person who has lived through stuff and made some mistakes, probably some big ones, and hopefully has changed and grown from those places. Like, I feel like so many parts of our society do not, even the healing communities that I've worked in, do not allow for people to become whole people. And I'm mildly obsessed with this right now.
And it seemed, you know, this is another moment where I don't have any authority to talk about what I'm talking about, but it seems to fit in with the development of having an online persona and an online performance of self too, where complexity is oftentimes not beneficial, you know, and a disturbed complexity is not going to get the kind of attention that a forthrightness and a single-mindedness you might get, which is not to dismiss the forthright or single-minded in person or online.
Right.
That's fucking awesome also.
Yeah.
But it's it's hard for that to be, and I think it gets, like, artists get taught that way. You know, I think the biggest example that springs to mind too, because now she's one of my absolute fucking favorite poets ever, but Lucille Clifton. If you look at like the poems of hers that get into anthologies, you know, you'll get the like My Hips Are Big Hips poem. And you're like, that's awesome. Like, why not? You know, and like a couple other poems that are like short, direct, and exactly about a specific socio-political issue. You know, and so learning her only through anthologies, I was like, that's a cool woman. You know, and then after she passed away and getting the collected poems and sitting down and reading it and being like, oh, fuck, man, like this is one of the most important poets of the century, you know, and the way that she got pigeonholed and taught through anthologies, or the way that I allowed myself to be taught about her, was such a narrow version of the human, so that it almost, my education of her is equivalent to like you saying about like the person putting the Native American on the side of the road in the poem, where I was like, oh yeah, she's like the, you know, the body image Black woman. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
She's badass. You know, and not being like her poems of love, of grief, of national importance, of personal history, of family history, all the, you know, all the things that are in her collected poems that are like all the things that are in her life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just how fucking astounding her prosody is too. It's just such a, like, every line is fucking perfect and so simple and so right and so absolutely landing. But yeah, there's this way that like the mask sells, you know. And there's a reason that like every Hollywood person has like a team of 20 handlers or something like that.
Right. Don't say that. Don't write that. Wait. Let's see it first.
Right.
Let me fix your eyebrows.
And it's almost at the risk of defending people that I fucking abhor. It almost makes sense of like why a segment of the country is like pro-Trump, coming out of that same idea, where like he actually, you know, he's 100% despicable in every way, but he does like not fit with the, you know, does not stay in the handler's grasp.
Right.
So I could understand that element of feeling like affinity with him, even though
I know the people that I know.
This is the first time I've felt any affinity for any fucking Trump supporter.
I know.
I so many times I'm like, into this cul-de-sac.
we can quickly head out.
Yeah. But I mean, it's ubiquitous. It's on the right. It's on the left. It's like, it's in the arts. It's in, you know, the trying to become a cooking icon. You know, I'm sure it's like exactly the same set of like limitations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I could be totally.
I think you're doing great.
Yeah, you don't need to compliment him.
I'm like, okay, no compliments.
Don't encourage him.
Who knows if anything we say makes sense. It's just like trying to figure it out. I think that's why I wanted to have these chats with people. Like I hadn't for a while because I was working during the day for a couple months.
Yeah.
But like essentially I was just feeling so freaking lonely, and knowing that conversations is something that I needed, not just like transactional, which is largely what my life had become, because like I was being a massage therapist at a couple of places, and I was being a adjunct part-time instructor at one place for, you know, it's different classes, not the classes that people wanted to be in. And I also worked at Starbucks, and I was trying to figure out how to freelance and stuff too. So freelance could be everything from writing a news article to writing some kind of tech shit, or like writing a blog, or writing someone's letter, or like writing like 5 best ways to upgrade your home real quick so you can sell it. And it's like the same material that 300 other articles have used, but you have to make it sound different, right?
Right.
And so all of those are very transactional kinds of engagements, the way you're talking with people and stuff. And, you know, like you press a button and you get an answer kind of stuff. And it was wearing me out. And I was just like, what am I missing? And so like that loneliness, it was just like, I need to talk with people. So we started having these coffee chats. I just started noticing my feeds. A lot of people were having a real hard time and feeling lonely too. And so I'm going to start having those again. But then this started happening too out of that, because what happens in those chats is like, they're totally freeform. People come in whenever they want. And like, there are all these amazing things that we learned from each other. And like, we like just have really great important conversations that we weren't able to have before because everything was moving so fast.
Yeah.
And I feel America has made it, like capitalism, I should say, has made it like very transactional. Like every exchange that you're having is a transactional exchange of some sort.
Yeah.
And that's why these became important. Because I'm like, what can I do? This is something I can do. I don't know if I went too far away from my, what's that?
I feel you.
What's your necklace?
It's some string.
It just feels good, like comforting, or?
It was, Bailey and I had gone to a restaurant and the burgers, the veggie burgers, were served in like paper with the string around it.
Yeah.
And then we just put the string around our necks. And then about a year later, we went to the same restaurant and got the same veggie burgers and put the strings around our necks again.
I think that's amazing.
So I've been wearing this string for like 2 years or something.
Nice.
Including when I was like traveling and camping through the Pacific Northwest, where it's always humid and always funky. And the string got a little foul. I had to sort of like figure out how to disinfect it while not taking it off, and was sort of like getting vinegar in there and trying to,
Nice.
So, just in case anyone didn't know, I'm repulsive. I've been wearing like string rot for 2 years.
I'm part hippie, so like I've definitely worn a lot of like kind of macrame-ish kinds of stuff that I wore for like at least a year and a half. So barefoot, dirty, like so dirty, like just all in the mud and drag, all the things. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with a little dirt.
You know, I'd always felt that way, and then the fucking COVID happens, and now I'm like, you know, I guess I have to rethink my I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely been on the probiotic side of things.
Right.
So.
Well, one thing I do want to ask is because a lot of folks kind of hang in one place for a really long time, and you've seen a lot of places, a lot of faces, a lot of happenings, a lot of landscapes, and I'm just curious about maybe one or two things you've learned from that you're carrying with you.
My impulses say I haven't learned a fucking thing. But I don't know. I mean, I think I'm kind of fall back on like, trite cliches and stuff, but people for the most part want to be kind. And when they're given an opportunity to do that, I feel like a lot of people show up for it. So the fact that I have this like quirky project, or that I'm traveling by bike, and clearly camping and living on the side of the road kind of stuff. Like, and I think it goes without saying, but should not go without saying, like the privilege of being a white guy. I think that people want to like find ways to be kind and supportive of things.
Yeah.
So it's been, I don't know if that's a lesson. I don't know if that's something I've learned, but it's sort of been a nice thing to run into strangers who, you know, let me stay in their little guest house for 2 days because it's snowing, or asking around at the city if anybody has a free space, and a friend of a friend letting me stay in his, you know, little guest room in his condo for a couple of weeks while I'm doing the dream thing in the city. And, you know, I think especially because I don't try to make a profit off of what I do. I try to really just price it all that I break even, or lose money. I think it people, hopefully people see that it's not like I'm not trying to scam anybody or anything. I'm just trying to do this very little tiny art thing. And when they have a chance to help people, and it makes me weepy constantly to think about it. There's people that, because it's hard for me to ask for help. So every time I do, people seem happy to help.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know if any of that's true. I can already think of a dozen arguments against what I just said. But
and
if I were going to try to make a platitude, if I were going to try to write a fucking memoir about it, that would be my big life experience in the turning point of the book.
But I think if it is true, it feels very hopeful, and it feels very necessary to hear. I think especially now when nothing is hidden. I think Arundhati Roy compared on one of the Haymarket talks, she compared the whole COVID scenario as like an MRI on our whole system, and like you can't unsee it. You can't unsee it.
It's funny, my Trump side relatives, clearly they know, they're baffled by what I do, but they're also like always like, aren't you scared? You know, like and I understand definitely white male privilege is part of like not being scared out there, you know. But it's also like that would be the first thing that they turn to, you know, that sense of like, yeah, or just like, but why aren't you scared? You know, why aren't you afraid to be broke? Why aren't you afraid to be like, to have no position of like social status in capitalism? Like, why aren't you? Which is not true either. And I understand that I have access and I have agency out of what I'm doing. But, you know, the sense of like, why aren't you afraid to like be next to people without a car door or a lock between you? Which, I don't know. The only time I've been fucking scared is when a group of multiple white boys drive by and front.
Yeah.
Even then, I'm just like, I feel like I wasn't even being like scared. It's like sort of just like, look at your little clown performance.
Right.
I was scared when the bear kept playing around my tent one night.
Yeah. Bears are fucking
bears are scary.
Yeah. Yes, they very much don't want to deal with that. I don't.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. I have one more question. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I feel like you so like I said, you see a lot of faces and talk with a lot of people, and even just talking with you, like you actually take interest in folks too, and I'm not going to assume a whole lot, but I think a lot about keepers of stories and like how I don't know if you consider yourself this, but you hear a lot of stories, I imagine. And I'm wondering, I mean, does that come into your work? Is that playing in the background? Is it, how do you?
That's I've never thought about it that way, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, you know, in writing, I think, you know, I'm speculating I've written something like 26,000 of these dreams now.
Mm-hmm.
And along the way, a lot of people tell me their dreams, like friends or people, and it's just because clearly I'm interested in the rhetoric and aesthetics of dreams. And I'm always like, can I steal that? Can I steal? And like, I don't think I've, maybe once, I think I stole a complete dream from Juliet, but with permission. Like I'll steal like a turn, or I'll steal like a shift or an image or something.
Yeah.
But then also, like, there's a way that, much like in making, or what it felt like for me to be in an improv band and be like constantly trying to listen and position myself, like I feel like I'm out when I'm doing the dream writing, I'm out sort of trying to collect nouns and collect images and collect like things. So every conversation with people typically leads to something that I pull into it. So it feels, now that you're saying it that way, I don't feel like in any way I'm a story holder or a story. I have A, really bad memory, and B, I'm not a good storyteller. So, but that sense of like sort of being permeable with it, and the writing being sort of acknowledged as, like, I don't think of the dreams as like mine, really.
Yeah.
Like, I forget them after I write them mostly, unless I put them into a design, and like end up re-looking at them. Yeah, and I also don't think of them as mine really, because I'm trying to write in a way that is doing some kind of like cold read tricks from fortune tellers, from like boardwalk fortune tellers, and also a kind of like emotional open access thing, which obviously every writer does, and you know that's the whole point of lyric poetry and all that, or not the, but a point of lyric poetry. But that sense of like trying to position the text as close as I can to the reader while it's still narrative, you know, so it's not the kind of postmodernist blah blah like word salad stuff that just like requires the reader to do all of the work of the creation, but trying to make narrative in a way that the reader builds as much as possible. I really thought I was going to be like in tune with choose your own adventure books. And like there was a point when I started doing the dreams where I was like, oh, I got to read a fuck ton of choose your own adventure books because that's my jam. And you know, because they're second person,
right?
And, you know, and they are narratively permeable and stuff. And then I never really got any inspiration out of that. No.
How about D&D? How about Dungeons and Dragons though?
Probably more that, because that sense, that balance in D&D between structured narrative and random choice, you know, where like you have the story that the DM has developed, but you have the fucking dice,
right?
You know? And you have the ability of the players to work against the dungeon master. Yeah, nice. So it's probably in a vein of like that kind of storytelling where it's like, I'll think of a thing and then I want to undo that. So if I'm like setting something somewhere, I'm gonna make the Rock walk in and hand you a fern, and then now the story has to follow Dwayne the Rock Johnson and his fern as well. And like
right.
What sort of significance that might have. So that sense of like the dice throw is maybe part of it more than the story.
Well, then it's also all of the players.
But I appreciate you saying that because it really, I appreciate you saying that about the story thing because I don't think I've thought about the kind of permeability that I try to do with making a thing that is going to work on an intimate level with the person. But I don't think I've thought about the permeability of sort of how I'm collecting the world along the way.
Yeah.
And then for the most part, distributing it and deleting it.
Yeah. Well, what else? Anything else?
I don't know. Whenever I'm asked that, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just delete half of what I did say rather than anything else.
Well, if it feels too terrible, we don't have to.
No, it's the same thing as laughing nervously when a camera's on. Like,
right.
Just that sense of like, I'm rarely able to say a thing that I believe is true about writing or art or being a human in the world, but I don't have any quantitative or objective knowledge or training. So the only things I can talk about are things that are subjective. And then I don't believe anything I fucking say. While at the same time, I don't think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Someone I used to work for, I remember I was like asking about something I saw, and I'm a massage therapist. We've studied a lot of anatomy and a lot of physiology, and my program was more, there was some woo-woo stuff we learned, and we had the choice of whether or not we decided to do that, but most of it was based in science. So even like the energy work we learned, Shin has been approved for medical places, it's pretty much like moving towards medical body work. And like gosh, where was I going with that? Oh, I was talking with her because I saw something that was based on, it was like one of those memes, and it was like based on an old drawing sort of, but it wasn't really, it was like referenced, and it also wasn't quite right. It like the anatomy was wrong in it. And I asked her about it. I'm like, would you call this out? Would you tell this person? Like, what would you do? And they were linking it to like ancient practices or something like that, because something about this is not quite right. And she reminded me that this is a tricky thing to say, I feel like, but she reminded me that there are a lot of truths, and there's room for all of them, or something. I'm not quoting her quite correctly, but the basic part of it was that there are a lot of truths. Yeah. And we were talking about, operating in community too. So like, what is the correct course or whatever? She said there are a lot of truths, and the question I would ask is the biggest part of this message coming through, whether these little nitpicks, they were kind of nitpicks. I mean, I didn't feel like they were nitpicks because it was anatomically wrong. Right. But like the message that's coming through this though, like that is more important, is what she was saying. And the people surrounding her will help to kind of hone that message, so that if it's important for that nitpick I had to be fixed, it would be fixed. And I can't remember how that connected to what we were talking about quite, but for some reason,
I mean, I think that sense of like how subjectivity creates its own meaningful progress too, and like a group approach to subjectivity.
Well, that and I think it's a really kind of miraculous way of to be able to see multiple sides of a thing. Because most of us cannot see multiple sides of a thing. Most of us are very myopic, I think, in a lot of ways, for most of our lives, if not all. And I think of that. I don't know if it's a silly story or not, but the story about the blind monks surrounding an elephant, and they're all talking about what the elephant is, and their perception is all different. All of their perceptions are different, and they're all right, and they're also all wrong. And like, it's a piece of what an elephant is, and it is also part of an elephant. So like, it's like to be
I'm with all that until space. Like you know where I'm going with it's like I'm with all that and also like fuck Trump, and like
yes,
also,
oh my god, you're right.
It's like
you're right.
There's like this way that the right has exploited the attempts by complex thinkers to put forward subjectivity and multiple perspectives, and adopted that to be like, oh, then our idea that's totally fucking racist and that we hate people is also totally valid,
Right.
So there's this rough way that like the right has adopted almost like the mode of, like complex thinking that goes into, like maybe feminist memoir or something like that, and like adopted that in order to justify hate, where I'm like, because everything you're saying, I'm like, fucking right on, until you are putting forward a dehumanizing position or a position of violence, and all that.
Have you ever read any Lakoff?
What's that?
Have you ever read any of the linguist George Lakoff's work?
Yeah. Not for a while, not since grad school, but
yeah,
his stuff on metaphor affected me deeply back then.
His stuff on so what you were talking about was reminding me of the Little Blue Book. I had to look it up real quick. The Little Blue Book, which is based on a larger work he did that I'm not remembering right now, but he's talking about political ideologies, and it was when did he publish it? He's essentially talking about the language that's used in the political arena and why certain concerns and needs and etc. don't get through. And so like you're reminding me about the whole political right and how they have really harnessed the power of language to bring us all in, really. Like,
I feel like the first time I witnessed it in a way that I was like, oh shit, they're doing it. It was like Sarah Palin, because anytime anybody would attack her ideas, she'd be like, you're attacking my family. And that sense of like the making the personal political as like a way of marginalized people and oppressed people being able to speak into power was being inverted by the oppressors.
Right.
Saying like, oh, if you don't like my oppressive racist shit, you're insulting family and children, and
right.
And like, that sense, which I guess has probably always been there, but it was like the first time that I saw like it happen in real time on like an interview on the news, and it was like, oh god, oh no, postmodernism made a big mistake. oh boy.
Another person who talks about it, I believe she's Turkish. SECE. I took a picture of it earlier because someone asked me what books I had bookmarks in. Tamokin or something like that. I don't know how to say her name.
I'm not familiar with her. Maybe when you
really,
post this, you can put her name underneath.
yeah, I will. Sorry.
No worries.
ECE is her first name, and her last name is Temelkuran. And the book I started with was How to Lose a Country. And she's talking about how fascism builds over time. And then we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. And
yeah, well,
she wanted to warn people.
2 years ahead of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the current trajectory.
Yeah. And she talks about what happens with language and those appeals too, like those appeals that we learn in grad school or undergrad or whatever in like our logic class, that are incorrect ways of thinking, but none of us are immune
Right.
to falling into a straw man or whatever.
Yeah. As somebody who taught rhetoric for 15 years,
yeah,
on like on a basic level, like, yeah. I too am on Facebook.
I too am on Facebook. Oh no! I feel like that should be
just it's like a whole timeline of logical fallacies constantly.
Yeah. Well, would you mind telling folks how to find your work and how to support your work?
If I have a website, I have books available from Trident Books and Civil Coping Mechanisms that came out this year.
With photography too, yeah?
Yeah, the Depression is with the photographer John Pack. So you can get those through Bookshop, and if the dream stuff seems appealing, dreamdeliveryservice.com is where that's accessible. I usually do the dream thing like 4 to 6 months a year.
Yeah. Well, anything you want to add? There's that question again.
I really need a haircut.
Yeah. I get it.
I'm gonna finish off where I started about how bad my hair looks. I mean, as like a bald man, it's like irrelevant how bad your hair looks too. It's sort of like, it's not like anything I can do is going to make this look good,
Oh.
it's just sort of like which version of irrelevant do I want? Yeah. I don't know. Well, thanks for chatting with me, Tamika.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna close this up really quick. Hold on.